If you're trying to figure out which Warhammer 40k army is right for you, this is the video you need to watch before you spend a single dollar. Today, I'm ranking every single faction in 40k from easiest to hardest, covering both how difficult they are to play on the table and how challenging they are to paint. Because both of those things matter when you're choosing your first army, or your second, or your fourth. Every faction gets a play rating, a quick explanation of why, and a painting note, so you know exactly what you're signing up for before you open your wallet. So there's 4 tiers: easy, medium, hard, and nightmare. Let's go. Easy tier. These are the armies I recommend any new player without hesitation. Clear game plans, forgiving when you make mistakes, and painting schemes that won't break you before you even get to play the game. The first one, Blood Angels, are a fast, melee specialized space marine. The game plan is simple. Get across the board and hit things. The Death Company detachment even lets you advance and charge in the same turn, so you're in combat before your opponent has time to think. Losing a model stings a little more than just basic vanilla Space Marines. Losing a model stings a little bit more than basic vanilla Space Marines, but the straightforward aggression keeps the learning curve low. When it comes to painting, the red armor can be tricky to highlight smoothly, but the overall scheme is clean and achievable. Plenty of guide support online. I'd say it's a bit medium on paint difficulty if you want to go deep, but completely manageable with a base coat and a wash approach. Next up, we got the Black Templars. They're another Space Marine chapter and another easy pick. Black Templars are built around the Emperor's Champion, one dedicated melee hero who your whole army supports. The game plan is straightforward. The rules are punchy and direct, and the Crusader mentality of just getting into combat makes them intuitive for newer players. Painting, they're mostly black army, which sounds simple but can be really tricky to highlight. If you don't do that well, they come out looking flat. So high contrast black and a white scheme is striking when done right. Overall, it's manageable but a little difficult. So just invest some time into learning how to highlight black properly. Of course, Dark Angels, one of my favorite chapters, and I put them in easy, not out of bias, but because durability makes them very forgiving for a newer player. When your units are tougher and stick around longer, mistakes don't cost you as immediately as they would with more fragile armies. The plasma heavy playstyle gives you a clear identity, and the rules are accessible without being shallow. Painting them, they're a bit of a dark green armor. It's achievable with washes and dry brushing. The robes on inner circle units add some detail work, but nothing overwhelming. Easy to get to a good standard, rewarding to push further. Next, pretty obvious, is Necrons, and that's my main army. The reanimation protocols are one of the most satisfying and forgiving mechanics in the game. Your opponent has to fully commit to wiping out a unit, or you just stand them back up. The Satan Shards give you a powerful centerpiece monster that do their job without needing complex setups. Great range of units, versatile detachments, and a game plan that's always clear. When it comes to painting, the wide flat metallic panels, minimal organic detail, and a scheme that works beautifully with just a few colors, one of the easiest armies to paint in the game. I chose Necrons partly for that reason, and I've never regretted it. Space Marines, the classic starting army for a reason. Balanced shooting and melee, solid durability, and enough unit variety to learn a wide range of game mechanics without being overwhelmed by any one of them. Vanilla Space Marines teach you 40k properly. The rules are clean and well supported, with resources for new players. Individual models, when it comes to painting, are straightforward. The challenge is volume. You're painting a decent sized army, stick to a clean base coat and a wash scheme and you'll be fine. One of the best supported paint ranges in the hobby. Space Wolves. I'm willing to bet you can see a bit of a trend here. Space Wolves fit under easy as well. They're hyper aggressive Space Marines built around heroic intervention and close combat. The game plan is reactive and fun. You're threatening your opponent on their turn as well as yours. Logan Grimnar is one of the most imposing chapter masters in the game, and the whole army has energy that makes games feel exciting even when you're losing. Painting them that gray-blue armor is forgiving to paint, and the wolf pelts and animal companions add character without being too technically demanding. One of the more enjoyable Space Marine chapters to paint due to the variety. Last in the easy tier list would be the Tau Empire. They're the premier shooting army in the game, and pretty easy to learn. Point your guns, shoot things, repeat. The battle suits are powerful, and the game plan is clear. One important caveat though, Tau are almost entirely a shooting army if you build towards that Gundam look, which limits what you learn about 40k as a whole. Great for learning the shooting phase, not so helpful about learning board control and melee, and the full range of game mechanics. When it comes to painting them, they have those large flat battlesuit panels, and they're very forgiving. They're clean, futuristic aesthetic, one of the more achievable armies in the game visually, and the drones are almost too easy. Alright, medium tier. These armies are absolutely playable at any level, but each one has something that adds just a bit of complexity. A punishing elite model count, a slow movement that requires planning, a buff stacking system, or a game plan that needs real understanding to execute. Doable, but go in knowing what you're getting into. Adeptus Custodes. Now, with them having a low model count, it makes the datasheets manageable to learn. But the same low model count is the catch. Losing one custodian can be tough. Losing the whole unit is a significant chunk of your army. That 4-up invul keeps you alive, but when it fails, you feel every single loss. Medium, because the rules are learnable, but the punishment for mistakes pushes them above easy. Painting. The small model count and large flat gold panel armor makes Custodes one of the most achievable armies to paint. Easy on paint. The play difficulty is what keeps them out of easy tier overall. Definitely not a bad decision for a first army. Next up, Chaos Knights. These are big, powerful models that can catch less experienced opponents off guard. The elite nature means losing a model is significant, but each knight is so powerful that the game plan stays clear throughout. The army rule relies on battle shock, which wasn't much of a factor in 10th edition. It's worth watching how the changes to battle shock develop in 11th before fully committing to a strategy around it. Painting them, they have the large panel surfaces. They're manageable, but the corruption details, spike, demon faces, warped armor push them a little bit above Imperial Knights on painting difficulty, but still achievable with patience. Death Guard are forgiving to play because they are so durable. Mistakes don't get punished as immediate as they would more fragile armies. The challenge is movement. They are slow. Managing the board with a slow army requires real planning and positioning knowledge that takes time to develop. Medium, because the durability covers your learning curve, but the movement adds complexity, and that layer keeps them out of being easy. They're kind of hard to paint. The corruption detail is extensive and each model is unique. The good news, the decay aesthetic means imperfections can look intentional, so find the right scheme and it becomes more manageable than it first appears. Grey Knights. They're an interesting army that sits on the border of medium and hard. Their uppy-downy teleporting mechanics are cool, and their board presence is impressive. The challenge is matchup dependency. Grey Knights struggle into high toughness armies. The challenge is matchup dependency. Grey Knights struggle into high toughness armies, like Necrons or Knights, or high vehicle count armies. Knowing which fight to take and which to avoid requires real game knowledge. Ornate silver armor with lots of engravings and purity seals are very technical and more demanding than just standard Space Marines. Worth investing time and proper metallic techniques to do them justice. Imperial Knights. Same logic as Chaos Knights. Big powerful models, clear game plan, high impact. The heraldry and personal markings is where the complexity lives on both the painting and the list building side. Without the battle shock dependency concerns Chaos Knights, Imperial Knights still sit comfortably in medium. Due to the fact if you lose a model, it is a massive part of your army. Painting them, they have large surfaces, are approachable, but full heraldry with custom house colors and battle damage is a big time investment. A clean base coat gets you table ready faster than you think. Next for medium is one of my armies again, the Leagues of Votann. One of the most honest armies in 40k. Strong medium range shooting that isn't afraid of melee. Straightforward rules and a clear identity that makes list building intuitive. No gimmicks, no complex stacking mechanics, just solid units doing their job. What holds them back from easy is the learning curve around maximizing their shooting windows and target priority. Painting, they are much harder to paint than you think. Deceptively detailed models that look simpler than they are. I own Votan and I wish I'd done better with them. I wouldn't say they're for newer painters who haven't built some confidence first. Or at least that's where I failed. Orcs. One of the most fun armies in the game to play or play against. Massive range of units, multiple playstyles, and the sheer chaos energy of an orc army in full WoW is unlike anything else in 40k. The complexity comes from managing that variety. Knowing which units to bring for which matchups and how to maximize the WoW timing takes real game knowledge to get right. They're kind of a forgiving paint scheme. The more I looked at it though, the more I realized the newer kits have so much more detail than I first gave them credit for. So they're a little harder than I first anticipated. The green skin and dirty metal, the rough clothing, the mistakes can read his character, and the challenge of pure volume hordes. So try and batch paint effectively, and orcs will become a little bit more manageable. Tyranids. Tyranids are medium, but with an asterisk. They don't hit as hard as you expect from the lore. And if you go full monster mash, you'll have a hard time scoring secondaries. Learning to balance your big monsters with units that do some objective work is a real skill challenge. Once you figure out that balance, they become much more rewarding. Painting them is actually one of the most achievable paint schemes in the game. While a simple 2 or 3 color approach, the challenge is model count on horde style lists, so pick your scheme carefully and batch paint. Like I mentioned before, I chose the behemoth look. The black and red with a little bit of a blue highlight turns out amazing. So if you need an idea, try that one. And the last on our list for medium is World Eaters. Incredibly straightforward. Run forward, get into melee, hit things until they stop moving. World Eaters are one of the clearest game plans in 40k, and with 11th edition buffing melee across the board, they're in a great position. The skill comes in target priority and knowing which fights to take, but the overall approach is never in doubt. Painting with red and a little bit of gold or brass isn't the hardest in the hobby. Getting the blood and gore effects aren't necessary, but it really adds character to this army. Alright, getting into hard tier. These armies look incredible, have deep and rewarding gameplay, and produce some of the most impressive results when mastered. But each one has a specific reason and asks more of you than medium. Going in blind is how you end up frustrated. First up for the hard list, Eldari. Hitting like a truck, but shatter when hit back. Eldari require precision positioning and outmaneuvering your opponent constantly, because if you get caught out of position, your fragile units disappear fast. The skill ceiling is enormous, and mastering Eldari means mastering 40k movement and positioning. Hard to learn, even harder to fully master. Elegant, detailed models that reward skilled painters and punish impatience. Clean gem effects, smooth armor blending, intricate runes. Rushing an Eldari model shows more than almost any army in the game. Astra Militarum. Not complex in a rules sense, but complex in a management sense. If you go horde style, you're tracking 100 infantry models, dozens of data sheets, and an order system that adds a whole extra layer to every turn. If you go parking lot with mostly tanks, you gain a little bit more simplicity, but lose the ability to score secondaries effectively. Both approaches are challenges in different ways, and neither is forgiving to learn. Individual guardsmen are quite simple models, but the volume is the real challenge. Painting 100 infantry, even with a quick scheme, is a serious time commitment. And then the tanks have enough detail and it can be kind of overwhelming for newer players, so be aware of that. So respect the investment before you start. Chaos Demons. Now, these are tough for me to try and recommend anyway. They had no true codex in 10th edition, so that made the Chaos Demons difficult to learn with limited resources to draw from. The playstyle also varies enormously depending on which Chaos God you focus on. Khorne Demons play nothing like Siege Demons, but you can run a big monster stat check army that catches less experienced opponents off guard. Similar idea to the Knights. But understanding how to do that effectively requires knowledge of the faction. Painting difficulty varies hugely by god and by model. Nurgle Demons are forgiving and intentionally messy. Tzeentch and Slaanesh require color work that's a little bit more demanding. So try and pick your god before you commit to a scheme, and try and look up some of the great resources on YouTube to come up with a plan on how to paint those big centerpiece models. CSM. The mark system adds a huge layer of complexity that can overwhelm newer players. Every unit can be dedicated to a chaos god, which changes their rules and interactions. Managing that across a full army while tracking stratagems, detachment rules, mission objectives is a lot to hold in your head at once. They have enormous variety, and some of the coolest models in the game make the investment worthwhile, but go in prepared. All the complexity of loyalist Space Marines, plus corruption details, spikes, chains, and mutation effects layered on top. More involved than standard Space Marines, but the variety means no two units look the same, which keeps them interesting. But it's a big jump into managing that chaos trim, so careful of that. Drukhari. Glass cannon in the purest sense, so hit first and hit hard, or you're going to lose your army. Positioning and timing are everything, and the margin for error is razor thin. Harder to collect than most armies, which adds a financial barrier on top of the skill barrier. They're beautiful models and a compelling dark aesthetic, but not an army I'd recommend anyone starting with. The intricate dark armor with high contrast that require careful highlighting, similar challenges to Eldari. The dark sinister aesthetic looks incredible when done well, but demands patience. Emperor's Children. EC is fast melee and a shooting hybrid. That requires some knowledge of when you shoot and when you charge. Getting that decision wrong at the wrong moment costs you. The speed of the army is the advantage, but also a trap. Moving too aggressively exposes your units before they can do their job. They are a very rewarding army when everything clicks, but it takes time to get there. They're a relatively new model range with some spectacular individual models. The purple and gold with a little bit of black is striking but demands clean layering to achieve well. So I would say they're hard to paint, but they do have 3 of my favorite models within that range, and that's Fulgrim, Lucius, and the Defiler. So I don't blame anybody for picking this, but just know it's a tougher army to get into. Thousand Suns. Heavy psychic mechanics that require understanding how to maximize casting windows and buff combinations. Their Rubric Marines are tough but slow, and the army rewards patient methodical play more than aggression. Knowing how to sequence your psychic abilities and positioning your sorcerers correctly is the difference between winning and losing. The blue and gold scheme is absolutely iconic when done well. Achieving that smooth, clean blue requires multiple thin coats and patient layering. The gold trim runs across every model. Beautiful, but time consuming. That's it for the hard tier. Now we're on to the nightmare tier. 3 factions. And if you're a newer player, I'm not saying never, I'm just recommending not yet. Every army we've covered today has something that makes it challenging. These 3 have something that makes them challenging on almost every axis at once. Whether it's play difficulty, paint difficulty, rule complexity, and in some cases, collections cost. These are endgame armies for players who've already learned the game on something more forgiving. AdMech. High skill floor and a high skill ceiling. AdMech requires deep game knowledge to just function at a basic level. Stacking buffs correctly, deploying units into the right matchups, and understanding a huge range of interaction rules, getting AdMech to work is a significant investment of learning time before you start winning games. They're a nightmare to paint too. Cyborg bodies with mechanical limbs, robes, cables, electronic components, and exposed organic tissue. Multiple materials and techniques required on every model. One of the most demanding paint projects in the game. Adeptus Sororitas. That miracle dice mechanic is one of the most unique and complex systems in 40k. Generating miracle dice through acts of faith, banking them and deploying them at the right moments to swing key rolls is a skill that takes serious game time to develop. On top of that, the army itself has intricate rules around acts of faith that interact with everything else they do. Beautiful faction with a compelling identity, but the complexity earns nightmare. Incredibly ornate army, incredibly ornate armor, covered in religious stuff, purity seals, scroll work, and gold trim. The robes and fabric sections require different techniques than the armor. Stunning when finished, just time consuming to get there. That's why they've earned their spot here. GSC. They've earned their spot in Nightmare. And they are Nightmare on every single axis. And I mean every single one. The playstyle of bringing units back from reserve and ambushing your opponent is unique and fun once you understand it. but understanding it takes game knowledge. Collecting them is expensive. Painting them is one of the hardest challenges in the hobby, and the rules complexity is among the highest in the game. If you master GSC, you can play anything, but start here and you will struggle. Hybrid models with the alien skin and human clothing mixed together requiring constant technique switching on the same model, multiple color palettes, complex skill tones, and alien features that all need balancing, that's just a nightmare. And that's every Warhammer 40k faction ranked by play difficulty with painting notes included. All 4 tiers. If you haven't already, go check out my dedicated painting difficulty tier list video where I go deeper on the hobby side of each army. Between these 2 videos, you should have everything you need to make a smart decision before you spend any money. The short version, if you're brand new, start an easy or medium tier. Give yourself room to learn the game without fighting an uphill battle against your own army's complexity. Necrons, Space Marines, Tau, Orcs, all of them teach you 40k properly without punishing you every time you make a mistake. Once you've got some games under your belt, then go look to Eldari, CSM, Drukhari. And if you ever want to truly test yourself, AdMech and GSC are waiting. Now, all that being said, if you watched this whole video and you thought, I wanted AdMech or I want GSC, I don't care what this guy says, then you're the guy that should be getting them. Then you're the folks that should be buying them. But there's my warning, the caveat to every army. Drop a comment and tell me which tier list your army sits in and whether you agree with my placement. I read every single one, and we'll see you in the next one.